Hello. Welcome to this video recording and for my reflection. And what I wanted to focus on today is a question that I've been pondering since I went to the district, um, you know, the DPAC meeting for Minneapolis Public Schools last night. So, as some people may know, the Minneapolis Public Schools currently has an interim superintendent, Superintendent Gore, and now they're in the process of looking for a new superintendent. That search has begun. And one of the issues of DPAC to focus on in this particular meeting was the ways in which that the communications department for MPS was going to be handling and interfacing with parents, with students, with community, um, and their abilities for access of parents, students, teachers, et cetera, to be a part of this process of choosing the next superintendent. One of the things that's been really difficult about this process is the fact that the last search for a superintendent didn't pan out. And a lot of parents felt that because there were a lot of missteps by the board and other parties in choosing the superintendent, they didn't feel like they were vetted properly, um, or like we weren't, or like the district wasn't necessarily um, engaged or knowledgeable fully about the character and the abilities of these candidates for superintendent. And they wanted to make sure that that didn't happen this time, like what they were going to do differently. And one of the big reveals of this particular meeting was that the district has outsourced the engagement piece of um, the search committee to an outside like firm. Um, and this is interesting for a few points. My thoughts are that potentially the reason why they're outsourcing has something to do with not having any more missteps, and they wanted like an outside unbiased third party to kind of come in and take care of all the logistic stuffs about vetting, about school visits of potential candidates where they are currently, of handling the bits and pieces that are necessary to choose qualified candidates and create a qualified pool of candidates. Um, the other thing that is alarming about this, however, is the fact that I think this gets into a situation where the public, the clients, the customers, so to speak, of this whole thing, the parents, the students, the community, it will be really easy for this third party company to neglect or negate those communities in or those populations when it comes to putting up debatably legitimate candidates for the superintendent position. Um, One of the things that was like an interesting question posed by one of the parents is, um, how is the communications department of MPS and going to make sure that the communication of this particular process is going to be accessible and available and given to students, to parents, to communities, to actual schools, the media, etc. And the response was that we can't give you any we can't give you any firm answers on anything because we've outsourced the engagement piece of the search. But as soon as they give us a plan, We will submit that plan to the individual schools, newsletters, home, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and then the follow up was how much involvement will parents and students have in this choice, and that's when the politicking of it all began. One thing that I found was really interesting in the communications director's response is that, yes, of course, we want student involvement. Yes, of course, we want parent involvement and input. But the reality of the situation, in her next breath, she stated that they intend to offer the position to the new superintendent at the end of June, which is roughly an 11 to 12 week window. And that caught my attention because we're announcing that the search has begun. We are announcing that a third party firm is conducting the engagement piece of the search, and that you clearly stated that you wanted students and parents and community members to have a say and input in what they want, which I think is something that's honestly impossible to do in an 11-week window when you want to, by the end of June, make an offer. And this is not even like an acceptance, right? This is to make an offer to the new superintendent of whom you chose. And it's like, how feasible and inclusive can this process be with such a short timetable? And I think that one of one of the issues that I've had with this, process, and this going back and forth between the communications department and the parents of DPAC, is having great intentions, but no plan to make those intentions real. And I think that this is a perfect example. There hasn't been any there hasn't been any follow up with students or parents or the community members about the last process of finding a superintendent. The background, more or less, is Superintendent Gore was brought into this process as being an interim superintendent because the last process, ended up with not having any of the three final candidates taking the position. And so parents were supportive and surprised and more or less appreciative of interim superintendent Gore stepping up and kind of helping things run while they figured out what the next moves were. But I think there was a little bit of concern about, like, they're jumping into this new process, right? That they have to make a quick decision within 11 or 12 week window. And they haven't taken the time to debrief the last process with parents and students, or get parents and students or community members thoughts or ideas about the good things that Gore has done or the bad things that Gore has done, and how we can make sure to not let the next superintendent continue those bad things or continue those good things. And it's kind of like jumping into the next process and saying, hey, work with us, believe in us. And I think that left a bad taste in parents' mouths, regarding that situation. And so, which I completely understand it. And I think that that's one of the issues when politicking gets in the way of real issues and results. I mean, you have a district of, you know, um, 76 schools, right? And I'm trying to think how many students. I'm just looking at my notes. 36,000 students in 76 schools, right? And one of the biggest issues is like retention, especially among students of color. Let's see, 25% of students, so 1 in 4 students are English language learners in MPS. Um, there's four official languages. Um, that as far as like communities and communications go. Um, and the issue is that about half of their current student body um, is projected to like leave every year. So right now they have 36,000 students, and they have an average of about 17,000 students who leave the district every year. These are students who go to charters. These are students who go to suburban area schools. These are students who just their parents just move um, because of their lack of engagement with communities of color, with ELL communities, and how that affects student engagement, student retention, community trust, parent trust. And I think that kind of giving them this like table talk of, I hear you and I'm listening, and we want to give you the opportunity to say what you feel. But, um, I, along with a lot of parents, just felt like it was, the situation of like hell is paved, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? You want to, and you're openly saying that you're going to engage these communities in this process. But, if you can't give a clear date of when your outsourced firm is going to, um, give you the first round of communications to spread out to the district, then how can you make those promises? How can you ensure that voices are going to be heard, that opportunities are going to be given, that are inclusive, that are focused on racial, social, and educational justice, to ensure that the next round of candidates that we have, won't flake, won't back down, won't like leave, and that they actually want the job that they're applying for, and that they're prepared to do the job. Um, and so this was like a 2 hour meeting that I was a part of, and there were a lot of other interesting things that come out, mostly around how to mediate and how to talk about student success and student achievement and the lack thereof on a basis of race. Um, but I thought that a lot of times when we talk about when we have these conversations about schools and districts and the educational realm, we don't spend a lot of time talking about superintendents and the head and boards and how those decisions influence entire districts, entire um, you know um, school environments, and how that trickles down and affects the daily lives of students. And so I think as far as this reflection is concerned, that was the most important part, is for folks to be in the know about how this process works, how it's working for Minneapolis public schools, and um, the reality versus the desires of MPS, of parents, of the community, and what's realistic. And I think that when messaging happens in this very particular way, um, was really interesting to see and observe. And it was weird because it was an open meeting, but it wasn't public, which means that you guests and community members can come and observe, but they can't say anything. Like, they have to just observe. They're here to observe. They can't be vocal in any way. So it was interesting, like, observing this entire conversation unfold, with input from the communication staff, with input from parents. Interim Superintendent Gore was also in attendance, and so his input as well was very interesting. Um, but this is an important question that I kind of want to think about, and potentially talk about. Um, because I think this process, especially for Minneapolis public schools, is a huge, huge deal. And with the exception of a few mediated instances, not much talk is happening about it, right? At least on the community level, at least in levels of school and folks. So, with that said, there's some things to ponder there, some questions to answer, some aspects to really consider how feasible, how realistic they are. And with that, I will sign out from this video reflection, and hopefully the conversations can continue. So, with that, have a great day, and hopefully we can talk soon.